everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening, according to wherever you live. Myrtle Levette here. Let me make sure I have my mic on. Yeah, it's one of those kind of days. But I'm here because I hope that you, first of all, are enjoying the whole month of September, where Womel and I have collaborated and we're putting the spotlight on podcasters with Hey Podcasters. We created a website where you can go and be introduced to a myriad fascinating podcasts. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. Do you know that there are over 1.5 million podcasts that are just doing their thing, you know? And a lot of them did come out of COVID. A lot of people discovered podcasts during the onset of the epidemic. The pandemic. We were all at home, didn't know what was going to happen. I spoke with Womel early on before we even got Hey Podcasters together, and I just said, "Wow, you know what? I truly, truly feel in my heart that it's the podcasters that have been friends, that have been confidants, that have been educators. We have been all things to all men during this pandemic. So kudos to all of my podcast colleagues. But I'm here today because I want to share information. Last week, I did a hour-long workshop on five things I believe that you need to really pay attention to before you dash out, buy a mic, before you step up and say, I'm going to learn how to imagine and build and launch my podcast. There are a few things that I want to bring to your mind. So starting today and on up until I think it's Saturday, I'm going to come to you live every day with one more tip, one more thing. It is my obligation as a podcaster and as one who teaches podcasting. I want the best podcasters in the globe. I want you all out there doing your thing. And I happen to know from firsthand experience, it takes help. You can't just say, I'm going to do a podcast and it's going to be perfect and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to take over the world. There are some things that you need to think about first. And you know what? The feedback comes from the man in the mirror. So that's where I had to start. I tell everybody that I went to Hollywood, California, and I learned how to do terrestrial radio, and that went on into podcasting. But when I decided podcasting was no longer going to be just a hobby, I'm coming out of this thing looking at it from a different lens. I had to get some help, and I had to look at me. How was I going to present this new process? How was I going to embrace this thing of podcasting? No longer terrestrial radio, no longer, I wasn't live streaming at that time, but how was I going to show up? So there were five things that I really had to take a look at before I bought a mic, before I even thought about the name of my new podcast. There were some things that I had to think of. So every day I'm going to come and I'm going to present one of those thoughts to kind of nail it down before you run out and get a mic, before you decide who's going to teach me podcasting. All right. So today, I want you to say, man in the mirror, we are going to take a look at why you want a podcast. Not why Margot podcasts, not why my neighbor podcasts, not why everybody else is podcasting, those 1.5 million folks that Margot's talking about, not why they're podcasting. Why do you want to podcast? Because, truth be told, podcasting it's time consuming, and it can be an investment in your time, in your interest, in your energy, all of that. So it's important for you to understand why you want to start a podcast. Perhaps you are an entrepreneur and you want to get in closer with your audience. You want them to know you on a deeper, much more intimate level. And you know what? That's what podcasting brings, because actually our audience is inviting us into their space before their eyes. Actually, podcast is audio. If we want to get down to the nitty gritty of it, a podcast is a bunch of audio files that have been compressed and they are distributed out so that your audience gets a chance to listen to you. It's just that simple. So they invite you in to listen. So why would they even invite you in? Why? So a lot of us, a lot of podcasters, we entrepreneurs, we are taking a look at our audience, our customer. We already know who we sell to. We already know who comes to us for our expertise. We pretty much know. So why not hitch that wagon of your business? Why not add a podcast to that? That's a very substantial why. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to get before my audience in a brand new way. I want them to feel my excitement. I want them to know me on a deeper level. And that could be every month. It could be every day. It could be every week where you do a podcast. It's totally up to you. You understand how when what too much is for your listener. You understand what is too much, because when you are an entrepreneur, everybody cannot commit to a daily podcast, and that's fine. But understand your why. Why are you podcasting? Okay? Are you an entrepreneur that wants to get before your audience? Is it something that you've always wanted to do? Do you see this as a hobby? You've heard a lot of people talking about podcasting, and now you say, man, I'm tired of kicking the tires. I can see myself behind that mic. I have a message. I have a new book out. I have a product. I have a service. Once again, it comes back to that entrepreneur and starting up your podcast. That is a very strong, motivating why. And ladies and gentlemen, I didn't have any of that when I started. I just had a message. I came out of corporate and man, I felt so beat down. I felt so dejected. I felt so kicked to the curb until I felt like, wow, when I get my feet back on the ground, I'm going to have one place where women in particular, men, you are invited, as you know, to Her Business, Her Voice, Her Conversation. You know that you are invited always. But I wanted to have one place under one umbrella where women, boomer women in particular, could come and they could be inspired. They could be encouraged. They could be inundated with how-to information. How do I become a podcaster? How do I write my book? How do I begin this entrepreneurial journey? When I've come from being an employee, how do I switch those hats? How? And it's been ever since 2017, it has been my journey and my mission that my podcast address the needs of those coming out of corporate. And ladies and gentlemen, we already know that 2 million of us boomers, we bailed at the start of this pandemic because for many reasons. We didn't want the exposure. It was opportunity for us to seek other things. Again, we had our reasons why. So with everything, when we begin our podcast, we ask ourselves, why am I podcasting? And I always teach my students, why is very firm and it is so necessary. It is part of the tapestry and the laying of the groundwork of your podcast. But ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, sometimes life will wear in on your why. And it will, a shiny object will come by. Holy cow! They're selling cars down the street and they're making a ton of money. And they got so many people listening and following and subscribing. Maybe I should go over there and do the same thing. Man, it happens to all of us. And for a minute, we override that why And we broaden that territory, stretch it to the limits until we don't even recognize our why anymore. And before you know it, you're off on a tangent and you only to look up, I'm lost. I'm in a godforsaken land I know nothing about. I went running headlong off trying to make a few quarters, and I moved away from my why. So I always teach my students why is important, it's necessary, but to have the backup to the why, man. I tell you, the reason why, the backup to the why reinforces your why. And my reinforcement to my why of having this platform for boomer women coming out of corporate so that up under one umbrella, you can find all of the information that you need concerning how to write a book, how to start a business, how to become a podcaster, how to reinvent yourself. We take on that huge discussion of reinventing because that's what you're doing. Once you become an author, you say that you're going to become an author. Once you say you're going to become an entrepreneur, you're moving from that employee mindset or that consumer mindset to being an entrepreneur. You're coming from listening to podcasts, or maybe you're coming from radio and you're making that big quantum leap over to becoming a podcaster. You are reinventing yourself. So yes, that's my why. But the backup to my why is that, ladies and gentlemen, I spent a bunch of, and some people say, scary money from the beginning so that I could enter this industry. Is it something that I tell everybody to do? Is it a requirement of my students? No, it isn't. It's what I did. It's what I did. And when I think about the money that I invested in me, who is well worth it, that's the backup to my why. Heck no, am I letting that money go for naught. Heck no, am I not going to show up every time and collaborate and strengthen my brand? Oh yeah, my backup to my why says, girl, you spent all that money. You better make sure your return on your investment is secure. Now, it's slow growing, but it's there. And it's effective. It's doing its job. When I got hit with that big tax bill because I went ahead and did my taxes incorrectly. Yeah, I'm very transparent about that. I had my taxes done incorrectly and got in trouble with the IRS. And thank God for this very talented CPA who's untangling everything. It almost put me to the side of the road. Let me tell you, it almost put me to the side of the road. But the backup to my why says, you can recover from this. You keep going. And up comes a collaboration with Womel, another collaboration. And up comes other open doors. And I am not promised. I got a big mouth and I tell you about everything that's coming up. But when I tell you about a call that I got from a producer yesterday, and that's all I'm going to say about it. And I have an interview on Thursday. That's all I'm going to say about it. The backup to the why keeps being strengthened. So I know in my heart of hearts that I'm doing the work that I'm supposed to do. I don't knock folks who retire and they sit at home and they're figuring out their next. I definitely don't knock that. And let me be transparent about one other thing. I used to be very vocal about folks that kick the tires year in and year out. I'm going to podcast. No, I'm not going to podcast. I'm going to podcast. I'm not going to podcast. I was real vocal about the tire kickers. Tire kickers don't come to podcastacademyonline.com. Oh boy. I was there. I was one of them. I raised my hand. I confess. But this week, I have a episode that I'm airing for the world about how I was a tire kicker, about scared to death to move from a small AM station, terrestrial radio, and move over to 24 hours, internet radio, podcasting, 24 hours, programming, all of that on the mothership, Live 365. Back in the day, it was the mothership. And I'd look at it and I'd run back. I'd look at it and I'd run back. And I'm Christian, and I say, Lord, I want to do that. Oh, I want to do that. And I look at it, and I know I fatigued those people in customer service. I think I asked them every question under the sun, and I'd run back. And I wouldn't do anything. That went on, ladies and gentlemen, about 3 months. I tell on myself. Yes, indeed. But there was this gnawing and knowing that I had to expand. It was time for me to expand, and I'm so glad that I did, because let me tell you, when I left corporate, what I walked into was larger than the smaller station that I was on. It had to be out on a podcast that could go international. Her business, her voice, her conversation had to go international. It had to be released by way of a podcast. So I'm telling on myself, and I hope that you take time to listen to my episode that's out on LinkedIn and on my profile on Facebook, because I tell on myself. But the joy of being in position when the opportunities come, because I said yes to being a podcaster, they are enormous. But I lean on my why. That's why I always crack people up. I always tell people I'm not selling cars by day and selling shampoo by night. I understand that I am a podcaster, and that content can be quite diverse, but at the end of the day, I'm a podcaster, and I teach podcasting at the end of the day. And therein, I find my monetization. Therein, I find my skill set that I expand upon, that I grow stronger with. Therein, I find my impact that I give to the world. Therein, podcasting, I find my joy. I find my power. I find my energy. Yes, I find my confidence. I find my confidence to live stream. Yes, indeed. Therein, in podcasting. So for the next 5 days, I'm going to expound upon the 5 things that I want you to take a look at before you run out and get that mic, before you decide upon who's going to help you imagine, build, and launch your podcast. Because it begins with you and her in the mirror. It really, really does. Establish your why. I want you to take the rest of your day, because I'm big on assignments. Your call to action today is to take a look at your why. Why do you want to podcast? Maybe you started up before. Maybe you took a class and you ran out and you got that big $200, $300 Rode Podcaster. Hey, I did that, but it was after I was established, But maybe you did all of that and you went into pod fade. That's okay. Take another look at why you want to take that mic out of the closet, why you want to dust it off, why you want to get back behind that mic. Write it down. Why do you want a podcast? Not what your mama wants, not what your daddy wants, not what your wife wants. Why do you want to podcast? And write it down. It's totally up to you. I'm telling you right now, you hear about, my nose is itching. You hear about blue ocean, red ocean, and people talk about, oh my God, there's 1.5 million people out there podcasting. It's a it's a red ocean. It's saturated. There's so many people out there. Surely nobody's going to listen to me. Surely all the spaces are taken. There's no more space for me. There are people thinking like that. Yeah. But when you think about how many people are in the world, When you think about the fact that 75% of all American households are aware of podcasts, that's a lot of people. And the interests are boundless when you think about how many people listen to podcasts and they buy the products that are advertised on podcasts. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm leaning in on you. If you have a book, if you have a product, if you have a service, you're an entrepreneur, you better become a podcaster. You better write down your why, quick, fast, and in a hurry today, because I submit to you, it's not a red ocean. The sharks are not biting and drawing blood. There's a blue ocean. And when you look out, there's sun and there's opportunity. There's water for as far as you can see. See yourself in that arena. See yourself podcasting. See it. As some say, manifest it. Taste it, drink it, imagine it. Today, your homework is identifying your why. Why are you podcasting, ready to podcast? Why? There's no right, there's no wrong answer. You know, you don't have to come back tomorrow and say, Margo, is this correct? Does this sound like this is something sustainable? Your why. And may I submit to you, while you're writing your why, what's your backup to your why? And it could be as simple as, man, I tried this before and I spent a bunch of money. I can't let that money get past me for naught. Or I invested a lot of time. You know, time is a big investment. Time means more than money, the dinero. Time is much more valuable because once it's been spent, that's really it. So we can spend the money and learn and expand and invest in ourselves. And I definitely know that I was worth every quarter, every dollar that I invested in myself. I was worth it. I am worth it. I gave myself permission to invest in myself. Make that jump from hobbyist to how does this become a business? I invested in myself without reservation and would do it again and continue to do it. So, you know, let's not get it twisted, but have your why and then the backup to your why. And then tomorrow, meet me over here on my Facebook profile page or LinkedIn profile page. And then we're going to take a earnest, honest look at your expectations emotionally and financially. What are your expectations for podcasting? All right. So that's what we're going to hit on tomorrow. We are covering the 5 things that I know you need to take a look at before you run out and get yourself a very expensive mic or even a cheap mic, you know, and take a look at these things. Be the man in the mirror before you go out, do anything at all. Okay? I'll see you tomorrow. Now, if you want to go ahead and really investigate in some wonderful podcasts that you're probably not aware of, maybe you are, maybe not, go over to heypodcasters.com and we have podcasts over there. And these folks are helping us to celebrate podcasters all the month of September. And then on the 30th, yes, on the 30th, it's International Podcast Day. We're going to plan something real special for you over on my profile page, over on the WOMAIL, I think over on the WOMAIL Facebook page. We'll get back to you before the 5 days of what I have to present to you are up. I'll have more details, but, you know, stop kicking the tires and take this thing seriously because a lot is happening in the world. Get acquainted with podcasting and, decide, I'm going to do it. So, bye-bye. We are going to end this broadcast right now. I'll see you back tomorrow, okay? Bye-bye now.